right, guys. Once again, welcome to another Professional Goblins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Scott Gladstein, and with me, as always, is
Mike Myler. Hi, everybody. How you doing?
And this lovely person here who's not saying anything for some reason.
Well, normally you introduce me as like the fabulous.
All right, sorry. Let me read
All
that.
down on the
Just
fabulous,
seconds ago, she said there was no Savannah, only Zool.
That's fair. So I suppose I am your third host, Zool, accompanied by Pelly the bird and Hadrian the fish.
And tonight we have a very special guest. I think he's a kobold, or is he's an Owen? Oh, we have an Owen. Good.
Hi.
So
Owen has so many hats; it's really hard to say.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, kobold's one of the things I'm not.
Okay, that's actually a pretty good one. So, Owen, I think everyone who's watching this should know who you are, but do you want to tell those who are apparently uncultured swine?
Sure. So my name's Owen K.C. Stephens. I'm the Starfinder design lead at Paizo. I'm also the publisher for Rogue Genius Games. I'm a developer for Right Publishing, and I'm a developer and consultant for Green Ronin, and a freelancer and some other stuff.
Like we said, you wear many hats.
He was a Reddit All-Star last week. That was dope. Was that 2 weeks ago?
I think it was 2 weeks ago. Yeah, that was strange. For the people that didn't notice, a story I told, I think originally, 15 years ago is when I started telling it, but I did a video a couple years ago about a playtest I did for the D20 Star Wars role-playing game back in 2000, where I had what I think were World War II veterans, but definitely a British gentleman. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I do that video, and I told that story, and it went viral on Reddit a couple weeks ago. And the video went from like 10,000 hits to like 240,000 hits.
I can't wait to see somebody make an animation of it, because that's just going to be dope as hell.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, if someone does that, that'd be delightful. I have a YouTube channel. That's where I put out all my stories, and it's always 50 views, 90 views, 2,000 views, 240,000 views. Okay, well that's sort of an outlier. That's
Mike.
That's a good story. I've been sending people forever.
Let's say, Mike, that sounds like the Professional Goblins channel. It's like, depending on what guests we have like 70 views, 70 views. 2,000. We had Frank Metzer on, and it was just like
my mom and somebody else's mom have watched it, and then it's like 350 old school gamers came to your channel for a day. Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, for those who don't know, the Professional Goblins. I think, are we really a podcast or a live show? But
we still need to work out the podcast.
Yeah, the podcast part. But I don't know. I like whatever it is. We have kind of segments.
If you watch the videos later, you're a podcast.
Yep. So we are. We have a segmented show. We have a bunch of segments here. We're doing a little faster, loosen up with those segments, so we can get to some of the stuff we want to talk about. I'm sure you guys want to hear about. But all of our guests and hosts and everyone talk on everything. So yeah, Mike, do we want to jump into the first one?
What is? Are we doing character lessons, or are we doing the actual show format?
Yeah, we haven't. Owen, by the way, because no one ever sends us something to review, maybe you should send us something to review that's not super long.
Yeah, we'll do a video review of. Well, we won't. Cool Shredder and Cheesy McPensworth, the mustache, and Unibrow Corn. We'll do a review.
Because it would be unprofessional.
Yeah, I can send stuff to review. Yeah, that's easy.
We have a few things I hear. But yeah, since we don't have anything from last week, let's go into game stories. This could be either a game you're currently running or a game you learned a lesson from.
But for me,
whoever you Owen, take it away, man.
Well, my best game story remains the Star Wars playtest. You can listen to that on YouTube, so I won't get it up here. But that is bar none my best role-playing game story, which is why I recorded it. I will actually tell a quick story, and this is on my wife, so I hope she'll forgive me. Back in 2000, when we first moved out to Seattle, I was working at Wizards of the Coast at the time, and 3rd edition had just come out, and we were involved in a game that had John Ratliff and Rich Baker and myself and LJ and a couple other people in the company. And my wife, LJ, made a cleric. Now, she's been gaming at least as long as I have. And at the time which I was hiding my books and playing in my mother's garage, she was like posting notices at the libraries for the supreme leaders in mental entertainment, slime, and creating clubs. And so she's a much bigger gamer and geek than I am, despite how our careers worked out. So she was making a cleric, and we had done that originally with a playtest version of the rules. And so at the time, there was cure disease and cure poison along with cure light wounds. And so she had written that down on her character sheet. But now we were playing with the third edition full rule book. And so she wanted to swap a prepared spell to spontaneously cast cure poison because someone was poisoned. And the GM told her, no, you can't do that. It's not called cure poison. It's neutralized poison. And she's like, no. And she goes flipping through the book, and she's like, oh, they changed it. Those bastards. And Rich Baker, who was sitting right next to her, turned to her and went, I'm sorry. Because that was specifically his call to change that rule. We hadn't played with the people who had changed these rules before. So all the venting that you normally do when you're playing is like, well, that's a stupid idea. There's a good chance there's someone in the room who's going to go, I thought it was a good idea. It really changed our dynamic. And from that moment forward for 18 years, there's been that risk that whatever we're doing, if we're like, well, this is ridiculous, this is stupidly overpowered, right? I mean, you ever run into Rob McCreary, just make sure that as soon as you see him, you start saying, Snowball's the most ridiculously overpowered spell ever, because he wrote that as a freelancer before he got hired by the company and is now the creative director of Starfinder. So when you're in those circles, you just have to get used to taking things with a slightly different approach when you're coming. What an interesting choice someone has made, or you can even go around in a little circular. It's like, hey, does anyone here know who wrote the dare feats for gunslingers? No one. Those are dumb. You do have to be careful about that.
Did I just hear you tell the Tomb of Horror
story? I just told the Tomb of Horror stories. I very much did. She was not in the room at the time.
Ah, good.
Awesome.
So we have a second special guest tonight.
Yeah, my wife is,
hello,
as usual, off to my side.
Hello, Savannah.
So that was a pretty good story. Owen, Mike, Savannah, you guys got a good one?
I do.
All right.
So
Go for it, Mike.
I joined my buddy's game. This is when he was still living here and he was working at Legion's Hobbies. And so we'd get to play like using all their shit like after hours and stuff. It was awesome. And when I first joined, he was like, play whatever you want. Use whatever you want from the 3.0 books. Just make whatever. And I was like, anything? I can use all the books. And he's like, anything you want. So this is a lesson in why you should curate what books you're allowed to have in the game. This is a particularly poignant for 3.0 because there are a ton of official 3.0 books. And they're not all intended to work with one another. So you can do stuff. I found Cleric was the most powerful of the 3.0 classes because there's feats you can take where you substitute your channels for spell levels without increasing the spell level you cast. So like I had this little bastard 5th level cleric that was either always flying or always had blind sight or just 24-hour duration spells that are only supposed to be like a minute. And he ended up, I forget exactly why, but we were trying to get some relic, and then he got it, and then he hid it in the one place the players couldn't get to it, and he beat all his bluff checks to like hide where it was. So then he just like completely changed the plot. It's like, I'm not having you deal with the Inquisition. You're not going into their mage tower. And I was like, but it's on the top of it. It's right up there. We know it's right up there. It's like, no, you have to go to this city. And yeah, but don't let people choose from all the books. Curate what you're allowing in your games, and you will have a better game.
Yeah, there was something a friend of mine played a centaur, cancer mage, raging hurler or something. I think it was one of the 3.0 splat books. And like when you're a cancer mage, you can have like there were diseases that had positive effects but also negative effects, and if you were a cancer mage, you didn't deal with the negative effects. So this person just like had this like rage disease for like years, and so they would just like throw rocks and obliterate like everything. You should definitely curate what your characters have.
Yeah, that's a thing.
Okay, I've got another story now, and Mike set it off. So even if something is reasonable, especially when you start allowing third-party stuff in, it can be reasonable by itself, but not reasonable when combined with other things. And so a GM, one of the questions I have found that as long as I'm with players that I trust, which is the best environment, one of the questions as a GM I frequently ask is, why do you want this? So I was playing in a 3-5 game where we were being allowed to build characters with any D20 resource. It didn't even have to be designed for D&D, right? We had people playing Jedi and people playing characters from Lone Wolf. But specifically, I was playing a fencer. And I told my wife's already laughing. I told the GM, hey, I found these 2 feats, and they work together in this really specific way. And she's like, look, the psychic can become a Hydra and make 14 attacks a round. I don't think I've got any concerns about what your character can do. So I found 1 feat from Sword and Sorcery and 1 feat from AEG, both of which were called Riposte. The way the AEG Riposte feat worked is that if someone attacks me with a melee attack and they hit, I get an attack of opportunity on them. The way the other one worked is if someone attacks me with a melee attack and they miss, I get an attack of opportunity on them. And I was playing a character, and this was, a 12th, 13th, 14th level game at this point. I'm playing a character with a 24 dexterity who has also taken a feat that also lets me add my int because I'm paying the swashbuckler class, so I've got a 20 int. So I get like 12 attacks of opportunity a round. And so there's this moment when a bunch of people run up on me and they all attack, they all miss, I stab them all, one of me hits, I stab him. So if you attack this character in a melee attack, it doesn't matter if you hit, miss, if you attack, you provoke an attack of opportunity, and I have 10 of those around on top of the 7 or 8 attacks I get per round for being hasted and 14th level, etc., etc., etc. And the fact of the matter is that while obviously these were not designed to work this way, and this is a case where I told the GM and she was fine with it, that still did not compete with the shape-shifting psychic who become a Hydra, right? I was still not breaking the campaign at all. It was the same game where my wife was playing a character who happened to be wandering around with a Bane against Dragon's Great Axe, was attacked by a dragon, crit it, and killed it on the very first attack. And the GM was just like, well, either it has a cousin who attacks you or we're done for the night. So we just threw another dragon out there, right? So the objective is to have fun. We're having fun. But the important lesson is, especially when you're going to third-party stuff, but also when you're dealing with like just a campaign that has, let's say, 50 hardback books of official rules, there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of combinations. And there's no way any company can playtest every one of those millions of combinations. So look at things, ask people why they want whatever combination it is. And if that seems reasonable in your game, which is going to be a local decision, sure, let it in. If it seems unreasonable, say, well, that's not in keeping with what I want to do in this campaign.
And offer alternatives too.
And offer alternatives. That's great.
Yeah. So that kind of segues nicely into the story I got. So I'm running a game. A friend of mine, she's a developer over at a big game studio. A bunch of her and her friends from all over the world at this point. I think we have someone from Brazil, Finland, Sweden, and all 3 time zones in America. I'm running that game, and it's a fun game. It's a fun game, but I basically told them, look, I know the system well enough. I know they're all they're not new. Most of them have played 1 or 2 games, but nothing more than that. Some haven't played any. I'm just like, guys, I know the system well enough at this point. Go ahead, as Pathfinder. Go ahead and pick whatever you want. We'll make it work. And to be fair, they didn't choose anything weird or OP at all. And it was kind of funny because they ended up with 2 samurai. Now, completely independent of each other. No attempt to like reconcile the two. Like they didn't talk. They just 2 samurai. And the setting we're doing is there's these floating islands, and some are below this storm-ridden planet, some are in the clouds, and some are above it. It's kind of a caste system, I guess. And one of the samurai lives on one of the top islands, and he goes down to help out people. And one of the other ones works in the slums and goes up to the top. And we decided that they know each other because they keep going like this and passing each other on the way by. But yeah, the group's really fun. We got that. I ran the first game last week. And with a 16-year-old, a character 16-year-old who is just like the greatest tool of destruction for the GM, because she's just like, she describes herself as a little bit extra, and she's having a lot of fun with that because she's like, she makes one of the samurai crawl into this conduit they're going through first, and they meet Red Caps and he gets his ass handed to him, and he's like crawling in full plate like, oh god, I can't get out. And she's like, why'd you do this? And she like just bolts out of there like, nope. Have fun, guys. She keeps trying to get one of the samurai to step into the room with the imminent death statues, which are like they're golems that basically were supposed to be like there was a way to defeat them, but they were way higher CR. They were like CR 9 or 10, and there were 4 of them in a 6-level group. But there was a way you could get something in the dungeon that just like one-shotted them. And so she steps in and gets dropped to 1 HP. And she's like, oh yeah, no, totally go in there. I'm just like, oh my God. And she's been trying to get the rest of the party killed for lulz. And like, she's such a petulant 16-year-old, like, I know everything, I'm so cool. And she's doing stuff out of spite. And I just love every second of it.
Cool.
They lassoed a rust monster. They legitimately had a lasso, and they're like, I want to lasso it. I'm like, fine, lasso the rust monster.
Yeah. It doesn't need rope. It's not like it's not a steel lasso,
Exactly.
like whatever. Yeah.
So they lassoed it, then one of the guys grappled it, and then they tied it up, and they threw it at the golems. But that didn't really work because I think a rust monster was like CR3 or something.
Yeah, it probably got a foot of a golem and then was done.
It was like, haha, and it was like, splat. And they're just like,
Yeah.
all right. That was a waste of time. And I'm like, I let you do it, but they actually parlayed with red caps, and they managed to make a damn good diplomacy check and talk red caps of all things out of murder. Well, to murder somewhere else, because, red caps, they have to murder something. But
Yeah, I was gonna say, you don't talk red caps out of murder. You just convince them someone else will be more fun to murder than you.
Yep, they realized that everyone else in the dungeon was non-biological, so they couldn't get the wonderful blood. And they, except for the players who were killing them, and they're like, you make a good point. So, there was also the Guardian of the Ancient, who was this big centaur.
We gotta shorten show this time. Do you?
That's right. But yeah, it was a good game. I'm looking forward to do it in the future, and we'll see what comes of it.
Cool. Yeah, I'm interested more to hear about these samurai. I like samurai stuff.
All the samurai.
One was a
What's the point of having a show if you don't get to tell other people about your games? I mean,
Yeah.
A whole party of samurai, then you could just be the 7 samurai.
I'd do that.
I ran a samurai one shot. I'm like, all right, guys, we're doing samurai stuff, and no one played a samurai. They played monks and like a third-party martialist and like a fighter and everything else, everything but a samurai. And I'm just like, all right, guys, we're doing this. So
it's like ordering delivery pizza and no one gets a pizza.
yeah. So Mike, do we want to move on to the next segment of our show?
Yes. What is the next segment?
Next one is favorite projects you're working on.
Okay.
You can talk about them.
Well, let's be quick so we can. Well, I mean, I guess not. We want to talk about Pathfinder 2 a lot. All right. I'll be quick. Book of All Darkness comes out this month, and I'm launching a Kickstarter on the 19th that I'll talk more about next episode.
Let's see. I got an interesting one. I can finally talk about it. If you guys ever read the Divine Dungeon series by Dakota Kraut, it's awesome. I'm working on making Cal the living dungeon as an actual dungeon. You can play 3 different levels, all the monsters from the books, the first 2 books at least, and it'll be a lot of fun. Dakota's really psyched about it. I've been talking about this for months, and I can finally announce it. It was fun to work on something with a book I love, and then talk to the author and be like, well, "What did you mean here?" So I don't know. It's kind of fun.
That is very cool. Do you have do they have any artwork or just like cover art or stuff?
There's
like
cover art. I'm commissioning a bunch of artwork for it. So we just started up the monsters. Most of I have to get through the second book monsters. But I think Rui Fiera is doing the dungeon art and maybe some of the character art. It's gonna be a small product. We're testing the waters with it because they have their whole cultivation system and very interesting mechanics with that. And if it sells well, I think we've talked about maybe doing something bigger and integrating that. But that might actually be a better fit for Pathfinder second edition.
We'll see.
So Owen, is there anything that you can talk about that you want to kind of plug here?
So the thing I'm actually working on this week at work is the Starfinder Armory, which we have announced, which will address the question that Scott threatened to ask me earlier, which is why aren't there any third level pieces of equipment in Starfinder? And the answer is pick up the armory. There's a longer answer to that question if you want to actually ask me later, but it's a big book. It's got a lot of really cool stuff in it. We're at the stage where I've seen all of the art. We've got the layout, and I'm working on sort of last minute tweaking of things, but that can take quite a while to book this size. I'm really excited about all the work that's been done. We had a lot of really cool writers work on it, and it's the first book that I've gotten to work with our full-size Starfinder team because we hired up around the end of last year. So we've got Chris Sims and Joe Piscini working with myself and Jason Keeley and Rob McCurry, our creative director, who were on board on that. There are lots of things I'd like to be able to talk about that are on the horizon, but I keep referring to them as the project after Armory and the project after Armory because we haven't announced them yet. There's going to be a lot of cool stuff to talk about when we do, but right now it's still, we're still with Starfinder. We're trying to get out some of the basic stuff, right? The Armory was good, and I think the monster system, the creation system in Armory will let people fill their galaxy as needed. Packed Worlds, which is either available or will be available soon, sort of spreads out our setting with a good deal more information. The next obvious choice was Armory, but I think anyone can sit down and say, ooh, here are 5 or 6 more books I'd really like to see for the setting. So would we. Those things just take time. So I'm excited about where we're going with Starfinder, and I'm really happy to have been on board with this since almost the very beginning. But it's just going to take a while till the obvious products have all been covered.
We actually have mentioned in the past, but like this game kind of feels like Shadowrun in that you get all the equipment, and that's half the fun of building your character. So there, like as soon as it comes out, we were talking about like there has to be an equipment book coming out soon because that's gonna be one of the gems, I think.
Yeah, I mean, again, you're right. The old Samurai Street catalog was a real must-have for first edition Shadowrun. We're all aware of that. A lot of us have been gaming since then, or even earlier than then. So there, you can almost go through the chapters of the book, right? Well, here's the spells chapter. Well, we sure could use more spells. Here's the equipment chapter. Well, we sure could use more equipment. Here's the starships chapter. Well, we sure could use more starships. And the thing is hundreds and hundreds of pages long to begin with. We needed the stuff that you have to be able to run a reasonable game. We have enough weapons and equipment that you can have a reasonable selection of effective weapons at any given level, but not every possible weapon at every possible level. And that's just taking time to fill out. And even with Armory, right, you might be able to go, well, there isn't an area effect cold weapon at 7th level. Okay, maybe not, but you don't need exactly that combination at every level because that would fill a 160-page book just with those guns. And but we don't have anything like there are no weapons at 3rd level as a gap anymore.
Param wants to know what your favorite item in the Armory is that you can talk about.
I'm not sure that there's anything that we're actually talking about yet. So this would sort of be cheating if I did it. But I will actually talk about the section I'm most excited about. We have a section called Weapon Accessories. And I didn't write it and I didn't develop it, so I got to just go to it and see all the cool stuff that you can now strap onto a rail or a utility section or have built into your gun. That's something that obviously people who are gun grognards are going to be excited by. I am very much someone who likes the mythology of the sword and the mythology of the gun and playing with those as character developments. And there are kinds of characters that want more than just pull trigger, pew, pew, pew. And so we've tried to speak to that market some. So there's stuff that, again, seems obvious that we just didn't have rules for or room for in the core rulebook that you'll be able to do once Armory comes out.
I have a question about Starfinder.
Yeah.
When's the Starfinder SRD going up, like the website?
There's an official answer to that. We've actually spoken to that, and the official answer is soon.
Okay.
In all honesty, right, you might have noticed that we announced another product this week as something that's upcoming. And when we announced Starfinder, Lisa Stevens very publicly said we will not be pulling resources to make Pathfinder less viable or less paid attention in order to do Starfinder. And we've gone to a 5-person Starfinder team. That's pretty big. But the rest of the company still has other stuff that they're trying to do too. So would we rather have had it up earlier? Of course we would have. Have we done work on it? Yeah, absolutely we have. Do we know when we're going to be free with the website rebuild and the upcoming playtest and everything else, when we will be able to push that button and what we want to have happen when we push that button happens? You know, we didn't want to tell people a while back, well, we can't have it up yet because we're redesigning the whole website and that takes a certain amount of resources, or we can't have it up yet because we're working on some other announcements and releases. And so we're working on it. It is not that we're ignoring it. And they're actually working on some interesting solutions to the problems of having these things be updated. But man, obviously we got to get the books that we make money on out the door, and we got to do the baseline, and the website has to work, or no one can play their online games. These are all things that are higher on the priority list. Everything we want to make a priority, but if you're going to get anything done, you got to list it. And if at the end of the week, the end of the month, you haven't gotten to that item, you can bump it up the priority list, but you can't magically make more time.
Time is indeed.
You can get more people, which makes more man hours, and we have hired a bunch of folks, but even when you hire people, it takes time for them to get up to speed.
Cool. I was just a little worried because, like, it's, you know, it said like coming soon in November, and then you know it's March. But if you guys are still doing it, then I'm good. We originally said just abandoned it. I was like, oh shit.
We originally set a specific season last year, and when it became clear we weren't going to get that season, we changed it because we don't want to be lying to people. When we said that season, we had every reason to believe we'd be able to pull that off. We didn't. So it's still a thing we want to have happen.
And you're working on it. It is going to happen. That was the part that I want to walk away with.
We are working on it. I can't say it will happen because I don't have that kind of power.
Sure, I guess, like, you know, there could be a nuclear power.
It has not been thrown to the wayside to never be considered again.
All right, good. All right, Savannah, do you have something that you're working on you want to talk
about? Just because we don't have a whole ton of time, I would like to put forth that I am very proud of the fact that I made a feat with death clerics in mind that is called Deadpan Stare.
I approve. Yes.
It's basically what is it, Hulking Might, where you add your strength to your charisma to roll Intimidate. In this, you get to add your wisdom to your intimidation roll. So
I can dig it.
I mean, I didn't become a game designer to not inflict puns on people.
Always.
Fair enough.
I was like at the end of the classes layout for Book of Vile Darkness, or Book of Exalted Darkness, not Book of Vile Darkness, Book of Exalted Darkness, and yeah, I realized that like we hadn't used Bad to the Bone anywhere in the book. And
that's a crime.
Yeah, I have a skull guy here, so I just completely changed the last fighter ability for the Student Warrior guy. And now it's Bad to the Bone. Yeah.
Good.
There's a rule at Paizo that as a freelancer you are not supposed to sneak Easter eggs into your manuscript, right? We don't want to have things that even we might not notice that are links that make suggestions that we don't make. So when I decided to have one of the soldier abilities regarding powered armor be called On the Bounce, I went to James Sutter, who was our creative director at the time, and said, hey, this is a reference to Starship Troopers, the novel. I would like to put it in here. It's kind of important to me. It's like, no, that's fine. But you know, you do want to put that stuff in there. It's like, oh yes, I want this one thing.
It's kind of like the one that always stuck with me was the final bloodline ability for the undead sorcerer, and it was called One of Us, and it's like
right, exactly that.
All right. Stuff that other people are working on that we don't make any profit from is the next part. I'm taking Pathways again. Pathways 74 is out. It's free. It's for Pathfinder, or I think it's pay what you want. So you know you can give them $1 if you like. It's from Right Publishing, so Owen can attest. It's great, and yeah.
Well, the parts that I wrote are great, of course. No, the rest of it is also great. The whole thing is great.
I've heard that.
And that, I bet you have, Scott. The impressive thing about Pathways, right? And my only involvement is Pathways is periodically I will suggest people that they can interview, and I write an article now and then. What?
And I lay it out.
And LJ does the layout for it. So yes, we are involved. But the thing is that, like Mike said, issue 74, there aren't a lot of gaming magazines still being published that are available in print, even if print isn't the only way to get it, that are at 74 issues and still going.
Yes.
So it's very impressive that Wright is doing that, and that Miranda Russell is keeping that going, especially at the level of quality that she has. So I'm all in favor of that. And if you run a small third-party publisher, you can always buy advertising in it because, as I said, there aren't a lot of magazines anymore that have that kind of longevity that you can put in front of people. So
Super cheap.
Another thing to note is that it's one of the only ones that I'm aware of that has, especially that has that longevity, that isn't directly affiliated with a first-party publisher. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's not
I mean,
the
it is a
book.
little bit because they advertise Lords of Goster and Shadow, which you can consider the first publisher, first party publisher for that. But that is not the majority of the magazine. The majority of the magazine is D20 stuff, Pathfinder stuff, obviously. And in this issue, we had Welcome to the Starways, where we mentioned that we were going to be doing some Starfinder support in the magazine in a Starways section.
That's cool. I can dig that.
That's cool. All right.
So the next section we got here is ones we can't publish from. Never mind, same section. I'm gonna plug something that was published I think in 2012. But I got to see it a month ago. So, you guys ever look at the monster generator they made? That guy in SourceForge?
No.
It is wonderfully written. It's a Pathfinder. It allows you to basically generate a monster. Does all the math that you normally have to do, and just pops it out as an exportable thing. And I won't say it's perfect. It's pretty good though. It's pretty solid. Enough that you can go, okay, I have to change these 5 things, rather than make your own thing. And it's free and it's wonderful. But my favorite part of it is there's a generate random monster button, and it is the funniest damn thing. I sat there for like 20 minutes just clicking the button. It definitely throws a bunch of. It just basically fills out all the categories and puts in a random name and a random description, and it's damn funny. I've been having a blast with it. I kind of want to make a book with the random shit that goes into there, but I think I'm going to skip on that.
Oh, that is cool though.
Yeah,
that is
it's
cool.
It's a lot of fun. It's the guy made it for free and was just like, hey guys, have fun with this. And it's pretty accurate, especially to I think Bestiary 1, I think is what it is.
All right. Well, do you guys have anything you want to plug for other people, Owen, Savannah?
Yeah, I do actually. There's Wayfinder magazine, which is a magazine that no one makes a profit on. It is a fan-generated magazine for the Pathfinder role-playing game in Golarion. You can go on the forums at paizo.com and find out information about it, but that's a magazine where people who have maybe not even broken into the industry, some who have and still love it, can write material and articles tied into Golarion, and those get edited and they get art for it, and it's all put together and bound and printed out. And that is one of the ways that you can try and break into the industry if that's something you want to do, because that is something that, especially if you're writing Pathfinder material, a lot of the developers at Paizo keep an eye on that. Tim Nightingale arranges it and puts it out, and he does a tremendous job with it. So I don't think that they do like a Patreon for it, but it is something that you can buy, and sometimes back copies are available for sale, and that's how they pay for the print run. But I just promote the idea of it and checking it out and seeing if you're interested in doing art or whatever for it. It's a labor of love for the whole thing. So there isn't money involved for any of it except to get together the money necessary to print it, get the cover, etc.
And if you go to PaizoCon, you get a copy with your swag bag, which is nice.
Yeah, I can't promise that they'll do that every year, but that has been true every year so far. Past magazines is no promise of future magazine performance.
Yeah.
Indeed. And Savannah?
No, not currently. Yep, I keep trying to remember to unmute myself.
It's cool. Yeah. You're doing a good job.
So, Mike, I think our next section is called Pathfinder and Starfinder speculation. Owen,
Yes.
do you have any idea what this second edition of Pathfinder is? We've heard rumors.
So obviously, this week, Paizo announced that we are going to be running a playtest for a new edition of the Pathfinder role game. Equally obviously, as the Starfinder design lead, I am not the person that is the most hooked into that, right? I've got my own game that I'm watching and I'm working with the creative director and a great team on. But I obviously am aware of it. There's a FAQ, a frequently asked question, that has a lot of really good information on it. And people like publisher Erik Mona and our chief technical officer Vic Wirtz are active on the threads where the announcement is in the FAQ, and they're revealing stuff. So there's going to be a playtest version of the rulebook that will be released this August. That'll be available in PDF for free. So if you just want to download the PDF and playtest, and then there's going to be a structured format to the playtest so that specific parts of the game can be playtested during specific time frames so that we can get that feedback, because if everyone yells about everything all at once, it is very difficult to parse through that and get useful information. But this playtest is launching a year before the final game comes out. So there is time in the schedule designed to take this feedback, make changes, make improvements, make this the game that the most people want to play in. I mean, obviously, looking at people talking about this, one of the things I keep noticing are people saying, "Ooh, if you do this thing like Starfinder, I'll love it." And other people say, "Ooh, if you do that thing like Starfinder, I'll hate it." So we know we can't make everyone happy. But Erik Mona has said for years that Erik Mona has said for years that the reason that we have not released a new core rulebook for Pathfinder that changes big chunks of things is that you sort of don't want to just tweak stuff and open up the patient risk that you'll mess something up along the way. As we were talking about earlier, when be careful what you allow into your game, everything is interconnected. So if you make a change, it may seem like a small change, but you really have to dig in there and look at how everything's interconnected and how it works and what the implications are. And that is opening up the patient. And you don't want to open up the patient unless you've got something really major that you think will improve things. So up till now, that has not been what Paizo thought was the smartest thing for the game. Now, obviously it is. And again, we cover that information in the FAQ. If you've got concerns about, are they still going to sell first edition Pathfinder books? Short answer, yes, in the pocket edition for as long as that makes sense. If you want to know if there's going to be OGL support, or is there going to be a compatibility license, a lot of that stuff is in the FAQ. So a lot of your concerns, I recommend you go read the FAQ, see through that, go to paizo.com, post on the forums if you have questions. And while we may not answer, are paladins still going to have a power that called Smite Evil that's +1 point of damage per level and double on the first hit? That's, first of all, playtest doesn't come out for 6 months, folks. So, well, okay, 5, I guess now. It's going to be a bit. But the broad strokes of what's going on and what we're planning are the things we talked about. And then there will be people like me and people that know a great deal more than me on shows like this, including one later tonight, who may have more information. And we'll try to get this information out in a reasonable fashion. If we dump a whole bunch of information on everyone all at once, that doesn't get disseminated quickly. So we're trying to give people plenty of lead up. And I can't think of another time in which a major RPG company said, hey, we're changing editions in a year and a half. So if you want to wrap up your campaign, if you want to consider, hey, I'm mostly going to be buying at this point pawns and maps, because I think those will be 100% compatible between editions. If you and your friends want to talk about how you want to do this, if you're a retailer and you want to look at what the pre-order situation is, right? We're getting a huge lead time for people to do this. And that is a big risk for a company because we still have a huge lead time in which we need to make money to pay people's salaries. But this is what Paizo thought was the smart thing to do for its fan base and for the game. And I'm very pleased to be part of a company that is taking this approach. And I think, and we did a long play test for the first edition before I came along with the company. And I think it's the right thing to do, and I think it will result in a really cool game.
All right, so let's see. Oh.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of folks talking about how, the edition wars are starting again, but it's much better than, just coming out with it suddenly, kind of like Thief in the Night style. Like, at least, well, obviously it's a 1.5-year playtest, so.
That's
I really like is that I wrote a very brief post about it. It's kind of like we've seen those steps though. We've seen Paizo kind of tweaking a little stuff like Unchained, and I recognize some of the stuff directly from like Starfinder. Like, I like that mechanic, and you guys are kind of using that too. I think that's kind of a very cool. Like, I like how methodical and very like, okay, they were not pulling that trigger unnecessarily. And I know when is Pathfinder 2 has been going to come out has been a question for what, since the first one came out, but no, I really like the way that the kind of structure and that you guys are really taking a long time on that playtest.
Yeah, I mean, by the time the final rulebook comes out, the original final rulebook will have been out for a decade. And 10 years is just a really long time for an edition of an RPG to stay unchanged.
And it stands up.
It's been tweaked and modified and clarified, but if it was, I think, 3 years from 3.0 to 3.5, maybe 5 years from 3.5 to 4, 8 years to 5th edition. Pardon me. And there are games that are on their 6th, 7th, 8th edition. That's just the nature of the beast. There comes a point where we've learned so much about how this game works that you don't want to keep spackling over problems that you can't fix without opening things up and adjusting everything. Now, here I'm speaking on my own experience about the game industry in general, not specifically Paizo or the design team's approach to this, but just that's the way these things tend to work. And I think Paizo's taking a very respectful and very informative approach to letting people know that there's going to be a change and giving them an opportunity to give feedback on what that change will look like.
So what you're saying is this is not a Warhammer where an edition comes out every 2 years?
I am not mentioning any other role-playing game in anything like a negative light.
Me and Mike have been bantering about that for months now.
They've been gradually shortening the length of the codex's lifespans.
Yep.
And whatever it is, I mean, that's I'm sure that's what they think is best for their game environment, right? No game company ever says, here's a stupid idea.
Games Workshop is in this weird situation where they can see the bloods on the wall, right? Like 3D printers are going to become viable. It's going to be a little bit. It's not as soon as everyone thinks. It's going to be like 8 or 10 years before the actual cost of maintaining your 3D printer and everything else. It's cheaper to make your own miniatures, but like they know that shit's coming. So it's kind of weird to watch them like flip out slowly over the course of a decade. And like, I haven't looked there. There's that lawsuit that the Games Workshop's owners have started to take against the actual company because of all the different, like, they have price control from Games Workshop that they have to deal with in their store, but they can't compete with the prices that Games Workshop puts up on their online stores. They're not allowed to change them because of the it's a whole thing. Yeah.
One of the there's an interesting video from Extra Credits on Warhammer and their IP use, which is talking about like how they basically give segments out to publishers to try things, and if they do well, they get a bigger chunk, and then they can try it again and again and again. And it's kind of interesting to see how that plays into their gradual movement away from tabletop to other IP things. It's kind of like the whole DC Comics. The comics now exist to support franchises, or at least more so with Marvel, but still.
But we're supposed to be talking about Pathfinder 2.8. So what about compatibility? Because like I was thinking this time, instead of doing the normal Kickstarters I do, that I'd try to do like a super long one and just let it be there and not stress out over it every single day and be insane. And you
said, know what to do with yourself if you didn't stress out every day and go insane, Mike?
You would have no idea.
I don't know. Find out at some point. But,
I guess.
I don't know.
I'm suspicious.
Yeah, do you have any idea when you guys are going to have the stuff polished for compatible publishers to use and access?
I mean, you wouldn't want to tackle any of that stuff until there's a final version of the rules, right? Because you don't want people making half-done stuff.
Yeah, there's no playtest compatible. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about 2.8 compatible.
So, but I'm just going through the logical steps. The playtest doesn't start till August. Until we start to get playtest feedback, there's no real way to know how much work needs to be done on the game. And until we know how much work there is to be done on the game, and it's not my department, it's not my call, but I would certainly not think that anyone is worrying about the answer to that until such time as they have some idea what the workload's going to look like.
Do you know what the wait between the Starfinder playtest and releasing stuff to compatible publishers was?
That's pretty
and do you think it would be similar to the Pathfinder 2.8?
I don't know if it'll be similar to or not. The decision was made consciously at an executive level for Starfinder to encourage extensive third-party support on day one. So a number of companies were given advanced access to a cut-down version of the rules that didn't have the setting information, etc. in it, because that doesn't really have things that are OGL compatible. That was an extraordinary step on Paizo's part, which is not taken for other products, right? It does not, when it released the Mythic Handbook, it did not say, hey, let's have other people competing with us for Mythic content on day one. That wasn't an approach. And I think it is an extraordinary statement of support for third party that when making a new game, instead of saying we want to be the only people that can sell you anything for this game for the first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, however long it takes people to put something together, we will give you some lead time. I know that lead time was at least a few months, but it wasn't a lot more than a few months because we wanted a final version of the rules. So my guess is that they're not going to want to release anything until, again, a few months before the final version of the rules is going to come out, because you don't want to do it until you've sent the files to print. But that is me speculating on process based on what the process was for Starfinder, and I can't say for certain. I can't say for certain that they will want third-party Pathfinder 2 support day one. That'll be a marketing and tactical decision, and that's above my pay grade. And even if they do, I can't say what the time frame or workflow for that would look like. But certainly I can say that that's going to be something, since they thought about it for Starfinder, that is certainly something that they will think about for Pathfinder, whatever solution they decide is the smart solution.
And they have mentioned in the FAQ that you pointed out to me yesterday, that it is doing OGL, and they are going to offer something in terms of a third-party license, a compatibility license again. But again, what that looks like, let's wait and see on that.
I'm just trying to plan out, like, okay, so I need to be ready in like winter of 2020 or spring of 2020.
And that's easy, Mike. Do a Starfinder Kickstarter.
I know.
Over this time frame, you'll just put out Starfinder.
We've thought about it too.
I'm only doing the next one 5e because I already had everything ready for it. This is the last one for 5e. I have a Varanthia Starfinder thing sitting there, although I think we're going to hold it. I think we're going to, because I was talking earlier with the team, and I think we're going to wait to do Varanthia for Pathfinder TV and not go into space. That said, I do have a hypercore space thing that's in the works, so it's coming.
Yeah, no, you can't not send hypercore into space.
I know, and it's dying for it, and I just got to finish playtesting the prison adventure. But all right, so let's see. Of the stuff that I saw, do you know anything more about the 10-level magic system? Are we finally abandoning the ridiculous progressions? Is it just going to be like, I'm a second level caster, I'm a full caster, I have second level spells, or like, what's the deal?
Remember how I said that we weren't going to be getting into the sort of nitty-gritty detail, like how much is the bonus of a smite evil if a paladin could smite evil, if a paladin smited evil?
Okay. Well, it seems like a broad design decision if you're going to have 10 levels of classes.
Sure, but if that's information that we haven't released to the fact yet, let's let people catch up to us. It's been less than a week. And for heaven's sakes, the Pathfinder design team worked really, really hard on this. I don't want to steal any of their thunder and have someone say, oh yeah, Owen already told us all about that. That's our game. No, they wouldn't be like that. But no, seriously, I'm happy to go over the kind of information that we've already revealed. But
the awesome shield mechanic. I'm 100% behind that shield mechanic. That sounds dope.
And that's an example of something we haven't talked about yet that if your viewers might not be aware of. There is already a video of the Glass Cannon guys playing this game with Jason Bullman running it, and he was converting a Pathfinder adventure on the fly to Pathfinder 2nd Edition. But there is some information about how the game works that you can get from watching that video and listening to what they say, and it'll give you a real feel for how the game plays. So that's the sort of stuff that we have released that we want people to be able to take in. I personally think actually watching people play a game and then playing with them is one of the best ways to get a feel for what a game is actually like, rather than just reading dry recitations of rules and drops. So if anyone wants to have a better feel for how these things are going to work, I would encourage you to go watch that video. Those are entertaining people, and they spent a lot of time and effort. They had to shoehorn that in during everyone is doing their full-time stuff, right? And they made the time to make that video. So we really appreciate that effort, and I think everyone should go watch it. And who's interested, go watch it and get a feel for what the game looks like in play for themselves.
All right. Do we want to keep on this topic? Do we want to keep going? What's your thoughts?
I say we stick on it. We only got another 10 minutes.
All right. I think we should at least mention that Mayfair went down now.
Oh, Mayfair, yeah, that should be,
Sorry.
Other RPG news and stuff and Kickstarters. Mayfair is closing in stores.
Wow.
Mayfair. Death of the legend, man.
I think Palladium might not be far behind them. That was it wasn't a huge surprise to me because, I've been here for 5 years now. And you hear horror stories about people, and Kevin Sembieta comes up a lot. So, I don't know. That was real nasty, the Robotech falter. That sucks.
What's it called? I think they're getting bought by Asmodee. They're getting a bunch of stuff.
Oh, Mayfair's getting a lot of Asmodee. Yeah.
Yeah, they said they're giving a lot of their stuff over to them, saying thanks, we appreciate it, kind of deal. I don't know what that looks like in the back end, though.
I'm sure it's nice. I bet the Asmodi dude, he's like the president guy. We shared a booth the 1 year at JetCon. He's really nice.
We were right across from when I was at that job I was working at for a while. We were right across from them. They were really chill.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, the trade show that you set up and didn't get to go to?
Hang on, I actually do have like a pass to go to it. And he's like, if you want to come, you can, but it's like to get there for me it would have been like almost 2 hours of travel and heavy traffic and a bunch of money, probably $20-$30 to get there to look at things I wasn't really
God, there are days when it's 2 hours of heavy traffic for me to get to work.
Yeah.
Here, it's 2 hours involving walking, train, car, walking, then back.
Scott's in the Big Apple,
Yeah.
and he's on like Long Island, right?
Yeah, Long Island, Great Neck.
Yeah.
And getting into the city and then going down to across the city is never a fun experience.
Yeah, my buddy's in Manhattan now, and I stay with him whenever I'm in New York, and it's much better.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is I get out of the city, which is nice. I actually can. It's a nice place to visit. I wouldn't want to stay there.
I don't understand people who live in New York. Like, yeah. I shouldn't say what I know Benji has done to make it work for him because it's not. He'd be upset if I shared it. So,
But Owen, I feel your pain. The I-5 is truly a blight on humanity.
Well, I don't even take the I-5, right? I'm going up 405.
Ugh, it's like a mini I-5 these days, though.
It is. And if anything happens on I-5, 405 suffers.
Ugh, everyone suffers.
I'm
I-5
actually...
is like this half of the state gets a cold.
LJ and I have been living in Kent because the rent was more affordable than anywhere near Redmond or Seattle proper or Bellevue. But rent out here is actually hitting that ridiculous level. So it's not final yet, but my best guess is that in the next couple months, we're going to pull up stakes and move to be closer to like 8 or 9 minutes from Paizo instead of 45 to 120 minutes from Paizo, which if that commute number works out, I'm going to get back between 28 and 40 hours a month of my life.
yeah.
So I will actually get basically, I will earn a 5th work week that I can use on freelance stuff just from moving. I'll have to pay more, but I will save some money on gas. Even saving the gas money, I'll still be paying some more. But
The money
at this
you make
point,
doing
I would have to move. What?
the money you'll make doing third-party work and freelance stuff that you would have spent driving, like.
Probably. Of course, I tend to overwork myself anyway. So the question is it realistic to think that I can overwork myself yet more? Or if I've reached my cognitive limit and the only reason I haven't baked my brain is that I've got 28 to 40 hours a week where all I can do is drive a car and there's some zen to that.
So I think that's you, me,
You
and
realize that like normal people and even like Owen people need rest, right, Mike?
Mike. Nah. You should have seen. There's an image on the little red thing when we were first doing one of our big books, and it showed what was next to my desk, and it was like 4 energy drinks, a thing of water, and it's like 2 5 hours, and it's just like they're like, do you sleep? I'm just like, half the format book, almost done, 400 pages, keep going, just keep going. So yeah, no, sleep is an illusion. You sleep when you're dead, right?
That's what I would say. Yeah. And sleep when you're dead.
I'm just saying, please, Mike, when you think your head's about to explode from all of it, do not be on the air at the time. All I ask.
I just when I start to get the light sickness, I'll go and I'll sit down. Otherwise.
So Mike, can you tell us about the facial hair, by the way?
I use it as a motivator. I hate having a mullet, which is I definitely in mullet territory because I live in Western PA where there are a lot of mullets. And I'm not going to cut it until I'm done with the Book of Exalted Darkness, and I'm not done with it until I get the proof, and the proof is in the mail. So I am unshaven, and I have way too much hair.
So are you going like full Natalie Portman and V and like shaving everything?
No. I used to buzz my head when I was a kid, and I have really big ears. So no. Yeah. No, there'll be hair. It'll just be way shorter.
So Owen, we got what do we want to say? Another 5 minutes? 5 minutes or so. What do you want to talk about?
We've talked about musicals before.
We have talked about musicals before. We've talked about football for some reason.
Yeah, I was gonna say last time we talked about.
Let's not do that again.
Jason Nelson wanted to talk about college football. Yeah.
So, yeah, if you wanted to talk college football, I'd have to leave, and my wife would take this seat.
We're good. We're good.
No, we're good. We're
We
good.
mostly talk about the Sooners. So actually, there is a topic that there is a topic that I think is worth discussing just in general, and that is the interconnectedness between the rise of RPGs as being cool, something that when you look at some of the behavior that some of the streaming shows get, I mentioned Glass Cannon, but also Critical Role. There are a lot of them. I don't want to start naming a whole bunch, but those have their own fan bases, right? Which is very, very different. The idea that hundreds or thousands of people will get excited to watch someone play a tabletop role-playing game. Even 10 years ago, that was sort of crazy. That those role-playing games are becoming features in pop culture. But then going one step out, what an amazing time to be a geek if you like speculative fiction media, right? I mean, there's always been a lot of books, but superhero movies, fantasy movies. I remember that you'd be like, oh, Barbarian Brothers 3 came out on video. I'll have to watch it because that's my fantasy movie for 1989, right? But for this 6 months period, that's what I get. There is nothing else available. And
to be fair, I would watch the shit out of Barbarian Brothers 3.
That's why I got a job for Blockbuster.
And so would I, right? Anime. But it's nice to have options. So one of the things I've found fascinating is that there have been some superhero movies that I have not enjoyed over the past decade. And as a result, there have even been some that I've watched a trailer for and I've gone, I'm not going to watch that. I don't need to watch that. But I'm glad it exists because that means there's now so much geek-related media content that there can be different kinds for different folks. As I said earlier, I don't think you can please everyone with anything. So the fact that they're doing more experimental stuff, I don't know if any of you saw the movie Colossal. Okay.
I don't think I did.
Colossal is a movie about a woman trying to put her life back together who discovers that when she is in a particular child's park at night, she creates
That's
a
my
giant
list, actually. I know what we're
kaiju
talking about.
that rampages through Asia and does whatever she does.
Oh yeah, I did.
That
Yeah,
sounds like an insane concept for a movie. That's not what the movie is about. That is the device that the movie uses, and it manages to be about other things entirely. That's a movie I don't think you could have made 20 years ago. I mean, obviously, technically it was possible. We had Godzilla movies at the time. But people have come to the shared knowledge of what these things are. Way back in early science fiction, a lot of classic editors used to say, hey, you get one concept that is not supported by science for your story, and that's it. And a lot of people picked Faster Than Light. So then later they started saying, okay, you get one concept other than Faster Than Light because we all accept that now. Even when the Iron Man movie came out, there is no magic whatsoever in Iron Man, right? There are no personal superpowers in Iron Man. Iron Man is a movie that has nothing but technology and genius, things we understand. But now we're getting to, and even when Thor first came out, they made this big deal of the first Thor movie that what you call magic, we just call advanced science. So they had this gloss that, it's still not magic. Now we've had Doctor Strange. So even just within the Marvel movies, you see that once they've created this common language, they can then do more and more and more of the, hey, I happen to have a holy plasma rifle stuff. And the general public accepts that because this has all seeped so deeply from geek culture to general culture, the way that Star Wars did in the 80s and 90s. And I think that has a lot of impact on what you can do as a media-related geek, be that as an RPG writer or a tabletop writer. And I think that's a really exciting time to see how the zeitgeist is evolving.
One of the things that when I had to start explaining what Starfinder was to some players, I went, well, it's not science fiction, it's science fantasy. And they're like, well, what's the difference? I'm like, oh, come with me on this journey. And that was a lot of fun to have that conversation. And it was very interesting to see when they went, oh, so Star Wars is more science fantasy a bit with the powers and the Force, and Star Trek, even though it's not really, is a little bit more science fiction. No, dude, when you start getting into like Katras and like spirit binding and the whatever.
I know people say that Star Trek is more science fiction and Star Wars is more science fantasy, but only one of those two series has a literal god grab a starship, right?
Yeah.
That happened in Star Trek. A literal god grabbed the front end of a starship. So that's pretty flippin' science fantasy.
But if you go back to the original series too, like, and then the Greek gods show up, and you're like, oh, okay, cool.
Exactly.
Jacob.
Right.
So that was Apollo grabbed the ship then?
Yeah.
Okay, good for you, Jacob. You got I don't have my Star Trek food is weak.
Yeah. I've been rewatching TOS over the last year or so. It is super because remember, you have to remember a lot of their stuff was, oh, we have this set from this other movie. Great, let's go use it. And that's how they wrote a bunch of their plots. They're like, well, we weren't going to make this about the Greek gods, but we have a bunch of Greek god costumes and a Greek god set. We're doing it.
I was part of a World of Darkness Mortal game that was essentially, like, the whole idea was to do Star Trek, but in that style. Like, each planet was its own, like, little microcosm. We dealt with weird, like, drug orgy snake people and all sorts of stuff.
Warhammer 40k Star Trek?
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like to me.
I don't know, dude. There's been a lot in Star Trek. Like, having gone through, like, every season, it's just except for anime.
It's 8:30, and we are supposed to be a pre-No Direction show, and No Direction is starting now.
All right. So, Owen...
We're normally on in this time slot this week, and we switched to Thursday specifically not to be on at the same time as No Direction, and then they're doing an episode tonight, so...
All right. So in that case, let's wrap. Owen, thank you so much for coming on.
Yes,
Thank
Owen,
you for telling us that you will eventually do third level items for a Starfinder. I hope you have a nice night, guys. Please enjoy.
Back next week.